really hit home for me was the real slide. That's something that's affecting me currently for my love for CyanogenMod. I came from a Motorola Droid, which had pretty decent support, and its 3G radio was all well and good. Recently moved to a Samsung Stratosphere, which is an LTE device on Verizon. And obviously, the RIL has not been reverse engineered, et cetera. I was hoping you could maybe go into a little deeper and see like what kind of work were you guys doing in terms of taking a chipset manufacturer, because I know the RIL on my phone is very, very, very similar to the Galaxy Nexus. They use the same, like, I think it's like a VIA 3G radio and I think it's a Samsung specific LTE radio. I know there's been some source code that was not released, I think, for the Galaxy Nexus. Just that particular radio was still kind of a binary or something. I'm not sure if I'm getting all this right, but I was curious what kind of work you guys might be doing to generalize work for certain radios like an LTE radio or you know some new 3G radio that might come out.
Okay, first off, that's a CDMA radio, right? That's a CDMA device. Yeah, figured as much. CDMA is a bit of a mess, and when I say a bit, well, not a bit, it's quite a huge mess, actually. To the point that Google now appears to be disavowing all knowledge and relations with CDMA devices, if you pay close attention to what they're doing. With the Galaxy Nexus and even with the Nexus S, they've moved the software images and the proprietary packages to an archive section, and they stopped releasing stuff for CDMA. So broadly, as far as LTE goes, we support it pretty well currently with GSM. CDMA, we are currently dealing with it on a case-by-case basis, especially because you don't really have, even though GSM appears to work the same way with every GSM carrier, the CDMA carriers, especially in the US, Sprint in particular is particularly, I'm being redundant, Sprint is pretty hard to deal with. They have a lot of weirdness going on with their devices. The whole concept, for instance, of having an LTE device without a SIM card is, if you told me 3 months ago that it was going to happen, I would have told you it's impossible. So there's a lot of weirdness going on there, and CDMA is really being dealt with on a case-by-case basis. We ongoing work right now in CM9, the GS3 devices, the Samsung Galaxy S3s for Sprint and Verizon, and Evo LTE, for instance, on Sprint, are being actively worked on, and part of the trouble is coming from the RIL, because RIL became the whole radio interface took some weird turns between Gingerbread and ICS. We've managed to work around it. Steve mentioned it earlier. We subclassed the RIL to a point where we actually have something that works very well for GSM. CDMA, not so much yet. It's an ongoing thing right now. So do feel free to come by CyanogenMod Dev. The people working on the CDMA devices are there. And I'm sure we can pull some information and get something running. But again, it's being dealt with device by device because as far as we can tell, no two devices are the same.
Hi. My question concerns security. How does the security on a CyanogenMod build compare to the official builds or to the AOSP builds?
Well, compared to official builds, you'll probably find that we're way more secure. You're not going to pick up a CM device that's running the latest version of CM and run one-click root on it. It's not going to happen. We're always up to date with the latest code. We pull in whatever fixes for whatever CVEs we find. We are actually in contact with some of the security people from Google, so we keep it up to date as we can. That said, we also provide root access. So recently in CM9, we also provide the capability of turning off root access. So if you don't want to use it, you have no need to use it, you can turn it off and no problem. It's not the default. The default is that apps can still get root, but they'll be prompted. But you can't just plug in a USB cable and get root on it anymore.
So my team, we were working on a project. We were doing a custom build off of AOSP for some specialized hardware. So we got the beefiest server we could get, the beefiest machine, and started doing our modifications to AOSP. And it would take us about an hour to do a full build. So what I'm wondering is you guys create nightly builds for, I don't know, like almost 100 devices. What's your build infrastructure? How does that work?
It's actually a rack of servers that's sitting in my garage. I'm not even kidding. They're pretty powerful machines. You need a ton of RAM to build the latest version of Android. You need like 24 gigs of RAM at least. Yeah. Unless you want to wait around for an hour, if you want to build it fast, you need like a ton of RAM. The more CPUs, the better. But the build system itself isn't totally perfect. Like when the Contacts app is building, it's going to take 5 minutes to build the Contacts app because the app isn't multi-threaded, and that part kind of sucks. But there's other tricks that you can do, like you can use Ccache. Ccache will speed things up. If you have an SSD, you can put your Outer on an SSD. That'll speed things up. Some crazy people actually put their Outer on a RAM disk, because they have 64 gigs of RAM that they don't care about. Our build servers, they do a build in about 10 minutes. Yeah, it actually takes longer to upload it from my crappy connection in my garage to the mirrors than it takes to build it.
If you use the standard like Google build scripts for AOSP, or do you have some custom build scripts?
Mostly. As far as the builds themselves go, it's pretty much Google standard stuff. The only thing we did have to modify was the environment setup, because it works fine when you have a handful of devices, but while doing CM7, we have about 80 devices on the tree, and the whole process, just the process of bootstrapping the environment took about 10 minutes. So we had to redo the bootstrapping stuff. But the building itself, it's pretty much standard Google.
At one point you mentioned having Sony Ericsson help you out with camera issues and drivers and stuff. I'm kind of curious, now that you have numbers like 2.5 million users at least submitting or using your builds, are you starting to see more support from vendors like Sony Ericsson, or even you mentioned security help from Google, stuff like that?
Yeah, it's a pretty big number that's running CM and other custom ROMs in general. So there's really no choice but to kind of take it seriously. As far as Google is concerned, there's not really we don't really have a working relationship or anything like that. But if we're talking about merging security fixes, they'll help us out, whatever. It's kind of, as far as vendors go, Sony Ericsson has been very, very cool with us. Samsung has sent us stuff. LG has done stuff with us. So, really, these are their engineering departments, and they love us. They think we're awesome. Now, their product planning and their marketing teams, they might not think the same thing. So, nothing's really on the record.
Hi, my name is Ravi, and I'm from the Bangalore Android user group. So you just said a part of LG sort of likes you guys, right? So has there been any effort to come pre-installed on a device, or has it been like, meh, whatever?
Yeah, there is, but what it really comes down to is that everybody's making this hardware. They're trying to build their own brand. They're trying to build TouchWiz. They're trying to build Optimus. They're trying to build Sense. They're not interested in having another OS running on there.
But you almost have a 2.5 million user base, right? Isn't
Yeah.
that's not exciting for them?
I wish it were more exciting. I would really like to see something like that happen. I would really like to see a CM device or, something that's built just for it. But it's difficult. There's even more concerns than that. These manufacturers, they're well versed in things like patents. There's whatever sort of intellectual property is involved. It's more than just a technical issue.
I'm a sound designer, and I was wondering the best way to contribute audio resources to Cyanogen, to the themes. Where would I go to do that?
Audio resources or audio code?
Audio resources.
Audio resources. We're always taking, ringtones and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I actually proposed like a month ago was I'd like to see an audio manager in CM so that, you can do things like, if you don't like the notification tones and all that stuff, there's not really an easy way to change those right now.
Right.
I'd like to see like a little manager type app for that, but we haven't done it yet. So, in the short term, we're not going to change that stuff. But in the long term, I do want to change that and, have stuff that, if you want to make an audio theme or whatever and make the clicks sound different and stuff, I definitely want to do that. Ringtones and stuff, you can just upload them to Garrett, or you can grab one of us on IRC if you don't want to do that and just give us a link. Basically just track us down.
Killer.
Yes. Business cards. Yeah, business cards too. I don't have mine. I didn't get it in time. Yeah, that'll fail.
Hi, is the core team like any push to include the Linaro toolchain to build a CyanogenMod?
Do you? Go ahead. You can have this one. Okay, so the Linaro toolchain. There are actually two sides to that. One is that even though Linaro did an excellent job with the toolchain itself, we're basically talking about an optimized version of GCC 4.7 for ARM. What Linaro did that was actually way beyond that was that they went into the Android source code and fixed a little issues that existed there that prevented recent versions of GCC from working. We have been merging that part of the Linaro work. The RC1 that Steve mentioned of CM9 already includes a fair bit of Linaro's changes to Android itself that allow it to be compiled with more recent versions. They don't have any effects on themselves, so you're not going to see optimizations coming out of these changes. And actually using another toolchain is something that will probably take a bit longer. We really want to, from our experience this far, that toolchain or the changes needed in order to use that toolchain, somewhere in there, something in there is creating issues for specific bits of hardware. The camera on the Galaxy Nexus, for instance, gets kind of messed up or non-functional at all. I think it was Tony Slayer that was playing with that. GPS on some other devices is also broken, so there's still a lot of stuff that needs to be tested, and we basically need to test it across the board. Because even though Linaro tested it on the Panda board, it was a very specific piece of hardware and doesn't really cover all the stuff we need to support. So first, we're just merging the changes into Android and make sure that they don't break anything. We actually already had two fixes to submit to Linaro. about that. And then we'll try and see if we can update the toolchain. Even if we don't go to the Linaro toolchain itself, we hope to at least be able to use GCC 4.6, which is much better in terms of generating ARM opcodes when compared to the current 4.4.
I'm not a developer, I'm just a user, but I have a question. Back in CM9, like the early nightly builds, Trebuchet used to have like an icons option. So my question is Trebuchet going to support icons like natively before, like ADW used to, or?
Well, we have the full theme engine, so really we'd rather see you use that. I don't think there's any plans right now for that. It's kind of meant to be a lightweight launcher with some extra options, so there's probably not going to be theme support. I mean, maybe he's got that on the roadmap, and I don't know about it. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it might just be easier just to use the theme, or that just includes the icons.
Out of curiosity, when you're ready in support for the new phones, how many devices gets broken in the process?
Well, not many. It's really hard to break the stuff. Now, there's been recent issues with certain devices where there were some leaked kernels out there that if you were to format the cache with these leaked kernels, it would break your device. Yeah, that's really bad. Well, it's leaked code. You get what you deserved, but it happened to a couple of people. But in the development process, that it doesn't really happen. I mean, for the most part, it's pretty recoverable, and depending on your knowledge of the hardware, what one person might see as a brick might not be a brick to somebody else. Unless you run it over with your car or something.
Did you also mean when we're bringing in code for a new device, how many other devices does it break? Is that one of the things you were asking too? Yeah. If we were to bring it in without setting things up specifically for those devices, then yeah, it would probably break almost everything else. That's why Steve mentioned earlier if-defing and many other methods that we use for narrowing changes down to specific devices so that it doesn't break everything when we bring them in.
Yeah, there's a maze in there of if-defs to separate one thing from another, and we'll do things like put guards in the make files to make sure that if you're building for MSM 8660, you're not going to possibly include code for OMAP. Yeah, we try and keep it separate, but it happens from time to time.
So after several years of doing this, do you feel like Android development is getting more kind of open or standardized, or less so? Like, or is it just kind of like a wash? Like, suddenly everyone's using a similar RIL, but 6 months from now you'll be dealing with the fact that everyone has their own NFC implementation.
You mean as far as running apps on CM, or?
Yeah, it's kind of like this work of like reverse engineering all of these proprietary extensions getting easier or harder.
Well, I guess it's kind of staying the same. In the beginning, it was really hard. Now there's just a lot more of it, but it's more common, and it's kind of some of the rate of change has slowed down. Like when you go from like MSM 8660 to MSM 8960 platforms, they're different, but a lot of the code works the same. So you don't have to dig too deep. But kind of what I said before, like once you get one device working, you'll get a whole bunch of others going. And certain subsystems are kind of the same, and like across vendors, like audio, like if you get audio working on a platform, you have a pretty good idea how all the audio for all the devices that a vendor supports is going to work. Now, at the low level, it might not work the same way, but at the high level, the concepts are the same, so you can figure it out. So it's getting bigger, but I don't think that it's getting more difficult.
First of all, thank you very much for helping to start and maintain an awesome community. It has been said enough, and it needs to be said more, so thank you for that. question I have is, in your slides, you had a lot of things that you were discussing that were pain points, problems, things that obviously made it hard for these things to develop to new devices. And obviously the bootloaders are a constant source of weeping and teeth grinding in the community. But from a development standpoint, what do you think is the greatest blocker to moving things on to new devices and to new chipsets and things like that?
Time. Yeah, really, we're starting to see, kind of with the last question, we're starting to see less enormous changes going forward. There's not any radical shifts like from one chipset to the next. They're starting to kind of work the same, and things are starting to solidify, and they're kind of starting to do things the same way. So, yeah.
At the same time, we're also starting to see new players getting into the chipset market. Android started out with the G1 and the few following devices, it was all Qualcomm. I think the first different one was the Motorola Droid, which came out with a TI chipset. But still, both Qualcomm and TI have been, to different extents, but have been pretty open with what they do. The reference code for their reference designs exists. It's out there, you can use it. Not always complete, but you can, for the most part, figure out what you need to complete. I wouldn't call them upstarts, but the new guys coming into the market, I'm not sure if they're trying to get their footing or trying to figure out how things work. Or in some cases, and I'm seriously not trying to generalize, but silicon vendors like Allwinner or Rockchip and a few others coming out of Taiwan and China are not as forthcoming with their source code as Qualcomm and TI. And as we see new, especially tablets, come up with those chips, we're still not quite sure how we're going to deal with them. I think Allwinner has, in the meantime, published a BSP about a month ago. We still don't have anything for the Rock chips. And then there's the case of NVIDIA, which I think most of you saw the video from Linus.
Pretty much like that in mobile, too.
So, yeah, they're pretty much despite their polite but pointless response, their positioning in mobile is pretty much the same as it is on desktop. Yeah, we support all the chips and we are everywhere, but if you actually want to do something with those chips, that's not what the vendor gave you, and you don't have a commercial relationship with NVIDIA, you're screwed.
So, Steve, it came out a little while ago that you were hired by Samsung. So, just wondering, is Samsung paying you to work on CyanogenMod? And does that mean that Samsung going forward is going to be more open with their code? Or are you going to have more access?
No, it has no relationship. I just, it's my day job. I do software engineering. I do work on phones and tablets, but as far as CM goes, yeah, they think it's cool. They're not paying me to work on it. Maybe I have a little bit of pull on the inside, and maybe I can throw some ideas around. But it's, I don't have as much influence as I would hope.
You mentioned the racks of gear in your garage, and I was wondering, do you have any sponsorship? Did you buy all that hardware yourself, or is it donation based? Or
we bought that hardware from it was all donations. We pretty much outgrew what we had before. Well, the hardware that we were previously using for builds, we had some massive cluster at it was some used for academic research, and we lost access to that. So for a while, we weren't actually doing nightlies, or we were, but they were actually more like weeklies. So we asked the community for some help, and we got a ton of response. It was completely awesome. We actually had to say, please stop giving us money because I'm scared. We got a bunch of money really quick. We bought a bunch of Xeon servers from Dell, and they're running in my house until Chris gets the infrastructure up at Hurricane Electric, and we ship them out there.
Yeah, but we also do have sponsors. I have a fancy mic. There's a company called Bytemark that has donated a couple dedicated servers to us that are actually in the build cluster as well. And then we have an ISP called Reflected.net that donates a lot of bandwidth to us. And if anybody here has access to massive bandwidth, we always need it. We usually don't take mirrors unless they're at least a gigabit on gigabit Ethernet and willing to let us use a gigabit. But yeah, so it's kind of a little bit of both.
What about with phones? Do people donate phones, or do any of the major companies donate phones, or is it mainly just people hacking on their own stuff?
I mean, it happens from time to time. I think we get offers all the time, people saying, oh, let me buy you guys a phone and this and that, but we don't want to take somebody's hard-earned money in the form of a phone and then not be able to actually get CyanogenMod running on it. So I think usually it's just whoever goes out and decides, oh, I want this phone, I also want CM on it. They're going to make it work.
Have you guys ever thought about forming a nonprofit organization to make donations easier or anything like that?
I don't know how to answer that. I mean, it's kind of something we constantly talk about, so.
It's on the roadmap.
What's the ETA for that, Steve?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that we're not sure about, that whether or not we're allowed to be doing certain things that we do, and I mean, we're doing them anyway. So yeah.
One of the problems with accepting donations in the form of devices or to buy devices is that there's an expectation that we will then deliver something we're still not sure we will be able to. So for the most part, we tend to politely reject offers for that kind of hardware because it's really hard to be absolutely sure that you will be able to deliver, and you never know. So we did have some hardware given to us by the manufacturers themselves. Sony Ericsson, Samsung, and LG that I know of have all donated hardware to CM. We have some very, very few cases of people who have accepted hardware for specific phones to work on, but they are by far the exception.
What we'd much rather have is a developer donate their time with one of those devices in order to work on doing it. And it's been mentioned before, we're very accepting to contributions to the project. When I started doing this, I started working with Kosh on the original Droid. He was working on the platform side and had gotten very far along, but needed somebody with working on the kernel side. So I started working on the kernel side and donated some time for that, and we got the original Droid supported quite well for a while there. I then switched over to a ViewSonic tablet that had come out, and I worked on that. That was probably the first full device that I had supported. Everybody's very helpful in helping me get the code submitted, helping everything get integrated into CyanogenMod itself, and get it up and running. Since then, I haven't had a whole lot of free time, so my time's been limited, which is why the current device that I support is one of the ones that are unlocked and available mostly in AOSP. So it makes it a lot easier for me to put my time into that one. But if somebody has free time and the coding knowledge, please, we'd love to have it.
Assuming that you guys want to grow this community, what will it take, to overcome all these challenges and hit 10x or 20x, essentially 40 million users? What are the if you had to prioritize these stumbling blocks, what would be the first three, for example, you would like to overcome?
I guess it's awareness. I mean, and we also need to, not only make people aware of what we're doing, we also need to get you interested to maybe do it in the first place. Unless we're actually going to ship on something that you can go out to the store and buy. Because right now, the current state of things is that you're buying an appliance. You're buying a car with the hood welded shut on it. So, there's before we can move on to 10x or whatever. I think the idea is more to make it known that we're actually an influential force. In the industry. I mean, 2.5 million users. I mean, okay, so maybe we're 0.1% or whatever, but still, I mean, it's non-trivial. I mean, anybody would love to have 2.5 million users. So the fact that everybody wants to do these kind of things, and they're really loud about it, and maybe they're actually making their purchasing decisions based on that. I mean, that's what we need to do. I mean, if one company is going to lock all their devices down, I mean, we need to make it known. I mean, don't buy that stuff. I mean, that's not in your best interest. They're not acting in your best interest at all. I mean, that's the best thing we can do if we want to grow our numbers.
What about obviously all the parties, all the that have vested interest in this, like for example Google? What could they do to help you guys out in the future? Like, is there anything that they could learn from what you do, like in supporting this many devices? Things that you could potentially, or they could, allow you to contribute back into the project to allow, more levels of abstraction. They could potentially make it easier to support these devices. Are they open to this?
That would be awesome, but I think that if they were to do that with us, they would kind of be playing favorites against the companies that are actually giving them money, right? So maybe, they tell us something that's on their roadmap, but they don't tell HTC. And HTC goes and implements it, and then they ship it, and then they have to do an MR to the next version, and suddenly they can't do it, and it takes them an extra 6 months because they need to, change the file system format or whatever the heck they did, because Google went and did the same thing that they did, but they did it differently, or they have to take that feature out. So, I don't know. I don't know how to build a better relationship there.
Okay. So, if you don't mind me asking more questions, what do you kind of, given that you've been kind of playing in the dirt for so long, what do you expect from Android going forward in terms of the ecosystem or Google or the platform? Anything that you could kind of, any predictions you could make?
You'll probably start to see it on more things. I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see it on desktops. The biggest thing that I'm afraid of is the sort of idea that it's kind of enabled, and that idea is that maybe it's okay to to sell general purpose computers as appliances, everything is locked down. You can't change anything, and everything that it can do, it's actually been limited. So that's kind of backwards to me. I'm afraid that that's sort of what it's enabling. So I hope that there's more of a push forward from groups like us and just general users saying that this is what we actually want, not this is what we're just going to take what you give us. I hope to see more of that.
What do you expect from MIPS and Intel? Now they're kind of getting into this market in terms of challenges or opportunities for them to better support you guys. Anything?
I don't really follow MIPS. I think Intel's a contender. I haven't seen anything that's impressed me yet. Other than like tablets with fans and weird stuff like that, but.
But in terms of like, just in terms of support, do you think it's going to be easier to support Intel-based devices, for example?
Yeah, I don't see why not. As far as like running Android on Intel, you can do that now. That's not an issue. Going forward, I mean, there's no reason why Intel shouldn't be a player in this market. I mean, there's no reason why that they're not there already, other than they really want to maintain compatibility with x86 and everything like that. And there's all the overhead of doing that. Yeah, that's. I'd like to see it happen, sure, but I think for now, I mean, even from like a technical level, if you've ever looked at x86 assembly versus ARM assembly, ARM actually makes sense. I mean, it's actually really elegant. I mean, it really does make sense. Intel is kind of building on lots of legacy stuff, and I mean, I think in mobile it's kind of biting them in the butt.
Mm-hmm. And one last question: how do you guys, know what you know? Like, what else do you guys do? What are your day jobs? This sort of stuff isn't well documented. It says all the challenges you have to overcome. You get, some sort of support from the engineers, from these vendors. You just spend nights and weekends, figuring this out by going through the source code. How do you guys, do what you do?
I think all of us just started learning it ourselves. I mean, I've always kind of had a self-starter attitude. That's when I first started using Android, I didn't really know much about it. I just kind of dove into it. I had been working in software development, systems engineering, things like that for a time before that, and that's what I do as a day job. I think that's pretty much what all of us do as a day job. Is we all work in that field somewhere. But there's not really. There's no company out there that's telling us how to learn this stuff. We're just taking it apart and figuring out how it works because we think it's cool to do.
But do you get any help from the engineers other than donating devices? Do they ever tell you, oh, this is how this particular HAL is supposed to operate?
I never have.
I have.
Yeah, I have as well. But I don't know, it just kind of happens. Post a question on Google Plus and ping a couple people I know that work at Google, and all of a sudden there's people commenting and telling me what's wrong with this app I'm trying to write or something like that. So it happens, but not that often.
It's not that there's a formal channel for it to happen, but I guess we managed to get followed or follow or make acquaintances with a lot of people that are either at Google or in vendors or just spending nights like we are and have ran into the same problem before. So we do get help from sometimes very strange places, but yeah.
I have one question. You said kind of driving people towards good hardware that runs Cyanogen. So what are your recommendations? Like, what are some good vendors that, I mean, I don't want you to I spoil your relationship with other vendors, but kind of, like, what's your honest recommendations?
I think we'll try not to get the guy who works at a vendor to to work that. So does any of you want to?
Nexus devices are the easiest ones to maintain, the easiest ones to unlock, the easiest ones to relock. The ones that are supported in that way that make it really easy for you to be able to install custom code are the easiest for us to deal with.
This isn't exactly a position we have as a group. I don't think we ever tried to approach it as CM, but quite a few of us have along the time talked about it in Twitter or G+ or whatever. And I think the consensus is that if a company, if any particular hardware manufacturer repeatedly tries to prevent you from putting whatever the hell you want in your device, why do you keep buying?
Motorola.
You're not okay.
My mic's cranked up, it's okay.
Those guys.
CDMA.
Or CDMA radios, but that's a completely different story, especially here in the US. But those guys are not a vendor I would recommend. HTC isn't one either, even though they are very, very popular. The whole bootloader unlock thing, Steve briefly mentioned it earlier, that it works for some, it doesn't work for others, it doesn't quite do what we need it to do. Depending on opinions, what they're doing right now goes from paying lip service to being perfectly fine. I honestly don't think that a solution that doesn't really allow you to update a phone unless you plug it into a computer, and that's what the HTC Unlock does today. You cannot update a phone unless you use a USB cable and plug it into the computer. If we had an over-the-air infrastructure for updates, and we're working on that, by the way, no ETAs, but if we had an over-the-air updates infrastructure, we could not be using it for HTC devices because you cannot write software from within the device itself. So I think you really, as consumers, we really should pay attention to what any given company has been doing before we decide to buy. If you want to hack on a device, I'll go with Beckett's suggestion, go with the Nexus. I mean, if you want to support a company or don't want to support a company, go with their history.
Really, at the end of the day, Samsung or Sony Ericsson?
You said that Samsung had given you some devices, and I was just wondering which ones, and I guess you kind of already answered that. How easy or difficult is it to work with the Samsung devices? And then kind of similar, now that Google has bought Motorola, is there any evidence that maybe they'll be a little less annoying?
I have no idea what Google's doing with Motorola. I mean, my suspicion was to build set-top boxes, but for Google TV, but I really have no idea what they're doing there. I don't know if they'll have any sort of influence in changing the way that Motorola does things or not.
Well, thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.